Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Arena Craft Podcast, a show focused exclusively on Magic the Gathering Arena. I am one of your hosts, Arjuna. We are, of course, joined today, joined today by returning host, Covertgoblue. How are you doing today, Covertgoblue?
Happy Halloween, or belated Halloween, depending when you hear this, everybody. I am doing well, and excited to be here, talking about my favorite thing in the whole freaking world, MTG Arena.
So here's the real question, CGB. Did you, for Halloween this year, don the costume of your favorite Magic the Gathering character, the Sky Noodle?
What? No, of course not. Come on now. That would be preposterous. That's absolutely insane. No. What is happening is because I am raising money for Extra Life charity, I hit a certain goal, and it will not be a Sky Noodle, but I will be... Let me pull it up for you. I will be this.
Whoa.
Tomorrow.
Wearing some kind of a lizard dinosaur Godzilla, perhaps, onesie?
That's what it appears to be. Some kind of a dinosaur onesie. Yes.
Okay. All right.
This was selected by, in their infinite wisdom, the power that is Twitch chat. Wow.
You know what they say, like, one person picking something can't be as right as 600 to 1,000 people picking the same thing. So, there you go. Good job, Twitch chat. We rely on you. We have a lot to cover today. Before we jump into it, I just want to highlight the fact that you, CGB, recently joined a team, did you not?
A team?
Witches of the Coast, is that right?
Okay, yes. For a moment, I had an esports team in my head, and I was like, that wasn't me. That was some other CGB. But I have joined Team Witches of the Coast.
Heck yeah.
To raise money for Extra Life, the charity that... to try to sum it up, we're raising money for Helen DeVos Children's Hospital Foundation, and Lady Lavinius, our team captain, was a top earner for them last year.
Nice.
And she said that the money went to making sure that kids who were stuck living in the hospital that couldn't leave, and there are more this year than ever because of COVID, had PlayStations and video games to play so that they weren't sitting in their room being sad all the time. So I thought that was a good cause. MTG Nerd Girl, one of my best friends in streaming, said that she would join, she's going to join the team if I get to join the team, so I got to tag along, and we've now raised $11,000 for charity.
Heck
I
yeah.
believe, as a team. Yeah.
That's cool. So if people want to support that effort, where can they go and when?
So the best and easiest way to find it would be to go to my Twitch stream and enter the command that's in the title of all of my streams for the last week or so, which is command Extra Life, ! Extra Life, or look in the description and there will be a link. Also, it should be the top line on the description of any of my YouTube videos. That will take you to my fundraising page. And right now, at the time I'm recording this, the next milestone goal, which is about $600 away, is that I will buy an ice dragon on Amazon.
What is an ice dragon?
There's a link. You should go check it out. and so should all the listeners.
Listeners, go check out what the fluff an ice dragon is. Well, that's really cool. I'm glad that you're doing that. In all realness, supporting kids in hospitals is one of the nicer things you can do in the world. So go give CGB and the team Witches of the Coast some support. And I love that you're an honorary witch, by the way.
I'm the only... Yes, it's myself, Jana Amari, Zabricus, Jamie Topples, Lady Lavinius, Team Captain, MTG Nerd Girl, and this guy.
With no irony at all, like, that is an honor, dude. You're blessed with an excellent team. So go you and
True.
Go all of you. Right, okay, well, so today we're going to cover a little grab bag of topics, mostly related to Standard, and we are going to go over the results of the MPL weekend, just briefly, because we spent a lot of time last week talking about that. CGB also made a very, very deep, about the deepest run you can make into a tournament without taking the whole thing down this week as well.
I've got a quarrel with that, but go on.
Okay, all right. Well, we're going to get educated about that. And then probably just discuss a few other things related to Standard. So let's start with your run, because I think that will be an interesting thing to talk about.
Okay, cool. So I had 2 competitive events. One I can sum up pretty quickly. There are snippets of both of these on YouTube, and there are the full runs on Twitch that are currently public, so if people are interested in watching, they can. The first one would be the Zendikar Rising Qualifier. Hold on, it's a mouthful. Just try fitting this into a YouTube title. The Zendikar Rising Championship Qualifier event on MTG Arena, which is the event that you get to play if you finish a season, in this case the season in September, in the top 1200 Mythic. You get to enter this event, and it's 2 days. And on the first day, you have to get 7 match wins before you take your 3rd loss. And on the second day, which you only get to do if you get to the 7 on the first day, you have to get to 7 match wins before you get your 2nd loss. A cool, 14-3 max. Easy mode. And it's best of 3. So it's pretty intense. So I haven't played one of these in a long time, and I usually finish in top 1200 Mythic almost because I can and I want to. I'm competitive like that. So this time I did this event along with the tournament we're going to get to afterwards because I was doing the charity. I thought it would be a good thing. A lot of people have told me they want to see me do competitive events again. So I thought it would be a good way to raise awareness and money for the charity, since the viewership on those things on Twitch is usually pretty good, and I could put some content on YouTube. Would be good stuff. I expected to, maybe win 1 or 2 and lose plenty. And fortunately, had a really good run on day 1. I actually went 7 wins and 1 loss. The 1 loss was a disconnect. My internet went out, and I had 2 timeouts, and it was game 1 when I disconnected. When I reconnected within about 3 minutes, it was a match loss.
What?
Yes.
Oh, that's so crummy, dude.
Chat was not happy. No. I shook it off, but finished, as I spoiled already, 7-1. So still wasn't close to elimination, thankfully. And had a really great day 1. I played Blue-White Yorion because, as I've said a few times since then, the deck is just in my blood. I don't need practice with that because I don't get any best of 3 practice anymore. Day 2 didn't go as well. I think I had really good draws. I was fortunate. I was red hot on day 1. Day 2, there was like mulligan and no lander, keep a 1-lander on the draw with a scry land, never play land 2. With 40 lands in my 80 card deck, yeah. So there was one of those. There was another game where I just missed a land drop after mulliganing that would have turned the game, and it didn't work out. Played a lot of Gruel Adventures, very aggressive deck. I think I was 5-1 against it, but still ended up bowing out with only 1 win on day 2. So overall an 8-3, 8-2 you could say because of the disconnect, but very happy about it. So that was a good one.
Yeah. I don't know. Sometimes I feel like competitive Magic is that way. You play well, things go your way, you get into a tournament, and then when it really matters, your deck just craps out on you. So.
I would have preferred that the deck crapped out on me the day before when I had more losses to give. You don't get to save those. I don't get an extra loss the next day because I finished with a loss to give on day 1.
Yeah.
And it's kind of brutal. It does feel like you should have more losses to give in the harder event, which day 2 definitely is because it's the winner's meta. So that's strange, but I don't make the rules. I'd love to. It'd be so much fun. A world lorded over by me.
Yeah, I don't know how much everyone else would love that, but
they wouldn't.
We'll leave it in the wonderful uncanny valley of hypotheticism. Okay, so now let's talk about the other tournament that you did much, much, much better in. This was a pretty strong showing from the CGB, man. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, I think it'll be... It's on the Mount Rushmore. At least 2 matches are like some of the all-time best matches I've played that I'll always remember. So there's a good lead for you. And this is the LFM Streamer Showdown. My teammate on Witches of the Coast, Jana Amari, invited me to play in it. I haven't been invited as a competitor in a best of 3 tournament in a while. And once again, I probably would have said no because I like to focus on content, but we were doing the Extra Life charity event, and I thought raising awareness and maybe putting up a good fight would help with that. It would help us hit our goals as a charity team. So I entered the LFM Streamer Showdown. It has a bunch of other streamers. Very good ones, it turns out. Rivals member Numat the Nummy, all-time Hall of Fame MPL member Gabrielle Nasif. And the tournament was played in 2 pods, and a pod had already played the week before, which meant that the winners of each week then play at the end to see who takes home the final prize. So we already knew our end opponent if we were to win our whole pod on this Monday night, and that would be the Brad Nelson. Best standard player on the planet, many would consider him, of the MPL. Yay. So,
just a nice, cool match against some of the best Magic players of all time.
Oh my gosh. I remember when I saw Streamer Showdown, I was like, all right, I can battle some streamers. And it's like, well, yes, they technically stream, but they're also freaking Hall of Fame material. It's insane, right? My very first round opponent, this is a double elimination tournament. My very first round opponent was Danny T. Law, who is
no slouch either.
Friend of the show, very good in best of 3, has been number 2 mythic many, many times. Always chasing number 1, and very good player. And I played Blue-White Yorion again because, like I said, don't need practice. Deck's just in my blood. I cut the Dream Trawlers, and I cut Mystical Disputes, and I went with a bunch of clones. I had 2 Sublime Epiphanies, and I had 4 Glasspool Mimics, and the idea was to blink Yorion a few million times by turning Glasspool Mimics into Yorion and blinking them back as something else, and so on and so forth.
Now, did you make that decision for any particular reason, or was it just because it sounded fun?
It's fun, but I did think that Dream Trawler is a card that a winner's meta would be prepared for, so I thought people would be very, very ready for Dream Trawler. Everybody would have Soul Shatters, and that actually turned out to be true, that people would have solutions to it, and it wasn't good against Rogues or Gruel, I found. It could never block Gruel because of Embercleave, and it just never resolved against Rogues. So
yeah, just side note on Dream Trawler, I think that's the perfect example of a card which, like, the average Magic player looks at and thinks like, whoa, that's a bomb, that's a game ender, what a horrible, hard to deal with threat. And I think better players look at it and they think, it's alright, it costs 6 mana, I probably have better things to be doing with my time. So I just think it's really good to look at what the better players in the game are thinking. If for no other reason than it just teaches us things. It just teaches us about what actually matters in high-level Magic, which tends to be different things than just slamming your massive Baneslayer Angel and hoping to ride it to victory. So anyway, just thought I'd point that out.
Yeah, I think that anytime you're looking at a 5 or 6 mana threat, you have to ask yourself where this is good and where this is bad. In Dream Trawler's case, it's when the opponents are playing spot removal and not sweepers or sacrifice or removal or counter spells or killing you before turn 6. Like Rakdos, when they don't run Soulseer, is a perfect deck to have Dream Trawler against. They just lose.
And it's still a fine card to play on the ladder because a lot of decks aren't equipped to deal with one on the ladder, right? So it's not saying it's a bad card. It's just interesting how the meta game does shift when you're playing against a higher caliber of player.
Mm-hmm. So first round, Danny T. Law. I think I'm going to win game 1 by a mile, and he draws his 1 of Shark Typhoon, makes a giant shark on end step, and punks me out of nowhere. Did you see this?
I did. I saw the exact lethal. I remember you had like this sick line. It was a really good line that you'd chosen. You had an incredible amount of value. You were just crushing. And I remember it was like the middle of your turn, and I was looking at his mana, and I was like, he has 8 mana. If he cycles a shark and then has any removal, he just wins on the spot.
So, yeah, 1 Shark Typhoon in his deck, and he drew it off the Dream Trawler attack that turn. Yep.
So, I mean, he had what he needed, and he punked game 1. But then you were able to turn it around.
I don't remember much about how. I think I owned the post-board games pretty hard. I don't remember them being particularly close.
I think you aggroed him out in one game. Just like the old Yorion beatdown.
Yeah, just smash. But I remember looking at the list, I felt really favored. He didn't have many counter spells. He definitely couldn't handle Sublime Epiphany very well. That card was just too much value. His Doom Foretold's were bad because I just had all these omens and tomes and plenty of things to sacrifice if I needed to. So I thought I had a good matchup, but Danny's a good player. I was certainly concerned I would not be able to take back the elk trophy that we invented on my stream for when we fight. But I am the current owner of the fictional, made-up, and highly sought-after elk trophy. So, was able to take that one down 2-1. And then I got the word of who I got to play in round 2. The one and only Gabrielle Nasif. The French Hall of Famer, I think he's 3rd in Pro Tour wins or top 8s. I can't remember which.
I mean, and here's the thing. Nasif was good back in the day, semi-retired from Magic, and then he came back, and he's just still one of the best. It's like, name a recent high-profile tournament that he hasn't frickin' top 8'd. I mean, the guy is frickin' nuts, dude.
Having an unbelievable year, streams to over 1,000 viewers regularly, and is known for being a master of control. And what's he playing? Blue-White Yorion. What am I playing? Blue-White Yorion.
Good luck with that one.
Good luck with... Yeah, I would probably say in Vegas odds I'd be a super long shot. And I also always wanted to play Nasif in a tournament with stakes because he's been somebody that I patterned a lot of my game after and have learned a lot from for years. I don't even remember. I think I might have been watching him play Pro Tour footage. Like, I've been watching his Pro Tour footage for perhaps 15 years. So it was already a big deal to me. And I looked at the decks, and I still had a lot more counters than he did in the main. So I was super favored in Game 1. Game 1 was awesome. I got down 2 Solemns and an Omen, and then Yorion blinked about four or 5 times with no interference from him. So I had some like 15 mana on the battlefield. I blinked out my board and then wrathed his board and then blinked my board back in. It was very fun. And Game 2 was on the edge. Like, it was on the edge of a knife because I took an aggressive posture because I didn't draw much value. I drew a handful of counters, a couple of creatures, like some Skyclave Apparitions, a Shark. Looking at my hand, I was like, I can't keep up with any kind of value from him. And he spent his early turns, like, Omen here, draw some cards. And I'm like, all right, I've got to figure out how to attack him. So I'm playing aggressively with Skyclave Apparitions, and I make a 3/3 Shark, and I attack him a few times in the air. And we get into this spot where he's got like the full grip. He's got like 7 cards in his hand, and I'm down to like 2 Shatter the Skies in my hand, and then a Sublime Epiphany, and it's my turn. And I use the Sublime Epiphany to copy my Shark, bounce his Shark so I can keep attacking and draw a card. So it's like defensive Sublime Epiphany because he was tapped low. Because I'm like, this is never going to resolve. He must have Mystical Dispute in his hand, And I put him in a spot where he's only got 3 life, and I've got 2 3/3 Sharks, and he taps out on his turn for Dream Trawler.
Oh, Nelly.
Mm-hmm. So I have enough mana to scry with my Omen, and I have 2 Omens of the Sea. So I scry with 1 Omen on end step, and I scry with another on upkeep. And I'm looking for Elspeth Conquers Death, and I think that's the only card in my whole deck that will tap his Dream Trawler so I can swing for lethal. And on the 4th card down, on the Omen on the upkeep, we find it, and that concludes a 2-0 match.
Wow, dude. It's another punking him out, man. You bum rushed him and you got him.
I blue-white aggroed. So bizarre.
So tell me, it sounds like maybe your deck was teched a little bit more just for the mirror than perhaps these other Yorion players were? Would you say that's right?
What happened over the weekend, and we'll get to the MPL results, is that people decided Yorion was best, so they started building Yorion to beat Yorion. And I don't feel that was the most conscious decision on my part as much as I just liked the cards better. I really like 2-mana counter spells like Essence Scatter and Negate a lot better than cards like Neutralize and Thirst for Meaning and Baron and Thassa and a lot of these other cards that were filling out 80-card Yorion piles. I just want to play some cheap counter spells, get a little value, and eventually Yorion will be good. I don't need it to be good on turn 5 every time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just cool to see. When you look at a card like Essence Scatter, you don't necessarily imagine that it would line up that well against a Yorion deck. But if you just kind of think through what people are doing, and, you know, if people are tapping 4 mana to cast things like Solemn Simulacrums or tapping 5 mana to cast things like Yorions, pretty solid little tempo play right there.
The big one now is Skyclave Apparition.
Yeah.
That's the one that I think is creeping up on everybody as a very good card, and having Essence Scatter for that is actually a big deal.
Yeah.
So,
and, you know, another thing I think about for these Yorion matchups is I feel like you are really rewarded for having cheap spells that can kind of fill in the holes in your curve. So it just gives you a lot more options, right? You can do things like play an Omen and leave up 2 mana for your Essence Scatter, or pull a Yorion into your hand and leave up some mana, right? Or gives you options like if you have 3 available mana, you can hold up an Essence Scatter and a Mystical Dispute. So I kind of like that. It just gives you a lot of flexibility.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree on that. I think that I don't want to play anything like a Neutralize right now. 3 mana is a lot to invest to get blown out by a 1 mana counter in Mystical Dispute, which is in a lot of good decks. Not every good deck, but a lot of good decks.
I know. Imagine trying to get a Neutralize off against rogues. That's going to be fun.
Yeah, I regretted my Sublime Epiphanies because to move the tournament along, next up I'm against Preddy MTG. Now, Preddy's recent pedigree is winning the Red Bull Untapped Germany event with the exact rogue deck list that he's running here. So he's got the reps and he's got the deck I really had hoped to dodge in this tournament. I didn't think many people looking at the pool would want to be on rogues, but I could have put Preddy on it. And Preddy was the only rogue gamer. And yeah, I had 3 matches with him, if you want to look ahead. Thanks. That was great. So Preddy, every rogue matchup kind of went the same way, which is game 1, I got absolutely obliterated because I had moved my Mystical Disputes and Glimpses of Freedom to the sideboard. And then game 2, you bring in the Shark Typhoons, the Mystical Disputes, Glimpse of Freedom, and things get a lot tougher. And in this case, I won game 2, and I lost game 3 in a very ugly mull to 5 and then draw nothing good sequence of events. So it hurt. The winner would have gone on to the finals from the winners bracket, which of course means they only have to win one more match to win the week's pod. But I lost, so losers bracket for me. I got to play, it's either Samson or Samsony, because there's a 1 on the end, and I'm not sure what it is. I'm going to say Samson. I did ask my chat, how do you say the name? Nobody knew for sure. If anybody wants to correct me, I still welcome that. And he had just beaten Yellow Hat with a really crazy 4-color Yorion.
Whoa.
It's a Kroxa Ugin Yorion deck.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's this tremendous collection of good cards.
Wow.
Blue gives Mystical Dispute, Shark Typhoon, Omen of the Sea. Red gives Kroxa that I mentioned, and I'm trying to think of the other cards, but I think it was Bone Crusher Giant and some other cheap removal. Black, there were 4 Pelika Predations to hit the hand.
Love it.
Yeah.
One of my pet cards, man. One of my pet cards.
Yeah, so much going on with this deck. A very, very sweet deck.
Wow.
But no main deck counters and Mystical Dispute in the board. So game 1 was a Sublime Epiphany because that card is absolutely gross in those spots. And game 2, I think his draw was very bad. I don't think he might have had 1 Mystical Dispute in the entire game and just was always on like 1 or 2 cards in hand as I was hitting more lands, drawing more cards. I felt like I was ahead forever. So I don't think his deck gave him what he needed. There was this Seagate Restoration into Seagate Restoration. So I have about 20 cards in my hand, and he cast Pelika Predation, and I could counter it in 5 different ways, but I'm just like, go ahead.
Which, by the way, is the most CGB flex of all time.
Very evil. Very evil.
Love it.
My prize is I get to play Preddy again.
Okay.
And Dimir Rogues. And not only do I get to play him again, if I beat him, I have to play him again in another match. Yeah. And I lose game 1 in a slaughter, as the rogue matchup turned out to be. Game 2, I am down to 2 cards in my library. I mean, this game is insane. You should watch the YouTube video just for the game, because I can't even tell you all the nonsense in the game. But like at one point in the middle of the game, I wore him down. I had 4 or 5 cards left in hand, and he's on 0. And I'm like, okay, next turn I resolve Shark Typhoon. We take over. I win. He top decks into the story. And the nonsense just starts all over again.
They always do.
And I just scream at the monitor on no, and but I end up with a bunch of angels. I've got 2 cards in my deck. He's on 1 life, and I have like angels from Amiria's Call on the battlefield and a Yorion and a Glasspool Mimic on an angel. So like he's dead next turn, but I have 2 cards in my freaking deck. What does he draw? Into the story. And what does Into the Story draw? It draws 2 cards, which thankfully aren't counterspells or Thieves Guild Enforcer, a land and a crab. So he goes for the crab. I Omen of the Sea, and I know my last 2 cards, and I pull an Essence Scatter out of the deck.
No way.
Yep, and I hit it. I think there's one of his cards was a counter, but it was a Whirlwind Denial, and I pay the mana. And then I get to swing with an empty deck against Dimir Rogues for lethal.
That's the ultimate satisfaction right there. Oh my gosh. Amazing.
And when I did, like, that game was so tense and frustrating, I'm just yell at the screen, die! Just die! And so the reward is game 3, and we're both under 5 minutes on the clock.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which
I end up
would maybe seem to favor him, right?
He's got the faster deck.
Yeah.
But his draw, I'm able to slow him down so that he actually has a draw that's mostly into the story counters and card advantage, and he needs to be more proactive. So he forces through this into the story on his turn when I don't think he wants to, and it leaves him with only 2 mana left. And everybody is like watching my side of things is like, why didn't he counter into the story? Because I have negate. But I also have Shark Typhoon and 8 lands. And he's down to 2 lands left, and only one of them is blue. So on my turn, I cast Shark Typhoon. I've only got like 2 or 3 cards left in my hand, but one of them's a Mazemind Tome and one's an Omen of the Sea. And he Drown in the Locks, and I negate the Drown in the Lock, and now Shark Typhoon's on the battlefield. I win about 3 turns later with like 22 sharks.
Well, I mean, I was just thinking, like, that's a card that the Rogues deck basically can't beat if it resolves, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. So while they're going to do everything they can to wiggle their into the story at the right time, if you can let them have into the story if you get Shark Typhoon. It's the great equalizer. People forget that occasionally there are times when it's correct to just cast Shark Typhoon for 6 and then just proceed to absolutely bury your opponent in sharks. So YouTube loves it, by the way. Love that stuff.
Everyone loves it, man. I mean,
and the reward for this epic hour, one of the toughest matches of my whole life, was that we get to do it again. And once again, I get wrecked in game 1, and I do the wrecking in game 2 with some sweet Glimpse of Freedom stuff. In game 3, he mulls to 5, I mull to 6, but his hand never comes together. I have Glimpse of Freedom to empty my graveyard, and things were good. Like that game 3 was pretty anticlimactic, but Preddy made me work for everything in the match up to that point, and was really hard. So, crazy set of best of 3 matches with that guy in this event. That means I win the pod. That means I win my tournament in theory, but then there's end boss Brad Nelson on Gruel Adventures, who is on the play in game 1, and I kept a hand with, I think it was 3 lands and 4 spells, or maybe it was an Amiria's Call and 3 spells, and I need to go watch it back, but I'm pretty sure I drew 5 lands and 1 spell and just flooded out that game and died, and it was very sad. Yeah, after stopping the initial onslaught, it was very frustrating. Game 2, I think I was ahead most of the way, answered all the things, Sublime Epiphanied, it was good. And game 3, I was on the draw, I had to mulligan again, and I missed my 4th land drop. If I had hit it, I think I would have stabilized. I would have had like removal plus counter. Since I didn't, he got to resolve more threats and beat me to death. And I lost it was a $500 match, but I had already won $500 from taking down Preddy. So it was a chance to double the money, but that's okay. It's the way it goes. Brad got to hang out all night and just wait to play one match, and I just kind of wish I didn't have to do that, quite honestly. I feel like I should have gotten to enjoy this absolutely sick tournament that I played without having to have the bonus match that the person from last week didn't have to play, but it's the way it is.
Yeah, it's the way competitive Magic seems to look these days. One person just chills and eats olives reclining on the divan while the other person works through the muck of the lower bracket to freaking come and face them.
I got a taste of that. It's not fun, but it does happen. I mean, it was like 1 a.m. for me. I don't know how Preddy did it. In Germany, it's like 4 or 5 a.m. for him playing that match. It's crazy.
Well, hey, congratulations, man, for taking down your pod, ending up losing only, in a way that mattered, losing only to Brad Nelson, who, like you said, best player in Standard right now.
Not surprised, would have loved to beat him, would have definitely put the cherry on top of a great night. The matches with Nasif and Preddy were amazing. So, yeah, I can't complain. I can't be sad. And for somebody who doesn't get a lot of time to practice or play best of 3, it was really exciting to not get completely rolled over.
Heck yeah. Well, dude, that's really awesome. Congratulations on your run. And, this actually kind of dovetails into what I wanted to talk about next. So maybe we can roll up some of your takeaway thoughts into some of the takeaways from the first weekend of the MPL. And here's what I wanted to talk about. You had this awesome run with a Yorion deck. And going into the MPL weekend, there were the meta game was dominant. There were a lot of Yorions going into that. I didn't do the exact math, but it was a big part of the meta game.
About a third.
Yeah. And coming out of that weekend, Yorion got pretty trounced.
It did.
Let's see. I'm looking at the Mpl standings, and the highest place for a Yorion deck was 9th place with Javier Dominguez. And then there really aren't that many other Blink lists until you go way down the list here. So Yorion basically got dominated in the MPL weekend, and I'd just be curious to hear your thoughts based on your winning your pod with it, thinking about the meta game of the MPL and et cetera, where do you think Yorion is currently ranked in the meta game right now?
Well, I think that Yorion is still a very, very good deck, and I think that's going to surprise some people, or maybe not. It depends on what you think of bias. I certainly know that my blue-white control decks, I really love those. So I usually stick up for them when I think that they're good, and I haven't changed my mind there. I will say this. Javier Dominguez's deck, before he played his matches, that's the deck that I took most of my list from. It was definitely the starting point for my list. You'll see it has the Glasspool Mimics. You'll see that it has Essence Scatters and Negates, no Neutralizes, no Barons, no Thasas, no Charming Prince, some of that stuff that we talked about. So my list had a lot in common with his because I think we found the same thing, that cheap counters were necessary for the mirrors. And I think I'm always kind of wondering how to break this down for people in the best way possible, because it's 100% true that pros metagaming for a field made up specifically of other pros, or in this case the MPL specifically for the MPL, is so much different than an open field tournament with hundreds of people or the latter. It's tremendously different because most of these people, not all of them, but most of them, know each other and have known each other for years. They're in the same Facebook groups. They know how each other think. They've just been in kind of the clubhouse of Magic the Gathering for a long time. And they communicate, and they know a lot about each other, and many of them work together. And when most of the field picks up on the fact that they expect Yorion to be highly played, the Yorion decks themselves start thinking, how do I beat Yorion decks? And everybody else who doesn't want to play Yorion says, how do I beat Yorion? And when one deck has the absolute target pinned on it by the best players in the world, and there isn't a broken card like an Omnath to carry the deck through the times when the hate shows up, then yeah, the deck is going to take a beating. This is how it used to be in Magic before cards were just obscenely broken, starting with Eldraine, right? Like, if a deck had a target on it, it was a terrible choice. We've spent at least a year in a world where if the deck has a target on it, it's still the right choice because it's just the best deck, and certain cards solo you.
I do somewhat take amusement at the notion that Yorion isn't a totally busted card. But I also concede the point that it is a card that you can metagame against, apparently rather successfully, if these results are anything to go by. So, point taken there.
That's because there's multiple ways to beat it, right? If you counter the Yorion itself, which is a 5-mana play that is blue, so Mystical Dispute comes to mind, or Essence Scatter come to mind, or a number of things in the Rogue deck, like Drown in the Loch, then Yorion didn't do anything, and it was a waste of 5 mana, which is usually fatal in Magic. And on the other side, what if you manage the board? What if they don't have these permanents to blink? What if they're like they really do rely on blinking things like Skyclave Apparition and Glass Casket. Glass Casket's like an Achilles heel. You can blow that thing up and get your card back if you have Ember Shield Breaker, Gem Razor, and other cards. Skyclave Apparition gives you a token. If you kill it right away and they never get a chance to blink it, then you can stay on the offensive. Like, the deck has a number of weaknesses.
Yeah, which I think is like you said, it's just a great place for a metagame to be, where you have a very powerful deck, but also a deck that can be answered with some degree of effectiveness. So, yeah, I like the way that's stacking up. I think that's really cool.
And it's interesting. I do think the Rogue matchup is very hard, and I think it's navigatable after board. Navigable? I don't know. Especially with the escape cards, and in blue-white, that would be Glimpse of Freedom, a card that was absolutely amazing for me.
So remind us what that card does. I don't remember exactly.
Sure. It's 1 and a blue to draw a card.
Okay.
But 2 and a blue escape, exile 5 cards from your graveyard, draw a card.
Got it. So it's free card draw when your opponent mills it for you.
And exile your graveyard.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
When you are playing the Blink deck, the matchup, as I've definitely played it a ton now, you need to grind out the Rogue deck, and that's really hard because you're trying to grind out a deck that has Agadeem's Awakening to keep getting their threats back, Lurrus to keep getting the threats back after the Awakening, and Into the Story. Like, the grind plan is not easy, but you have to be really patient, and you just have to keep doing it. And it's like grinding out a card with Glimpse of Freedom, and then another card, and then another card, and making sure that Shadow resolves because you waited until it couldn't be Mystical Disputed, and you have a negate or something. And the other big tech I found in my 80 card Yorion pile was I sideboarded in 14 cards, but I only sideboarded out like 6.
Okay. So you just
I was presenting 80 some cards in my yeah.
You're like, sideboarding up to like 65 or 70 cards is not good enough now. Let's just go 85. Let's just go 90. Hit me with 90.
I think I took out like ECDs and Sublime Epiphanies because they were really expensive,
Yeah.
and I left 1 ECD every time because there's 1 Lurrus always. But yeah, just going with the fat stack because getting crabbed out is no good. But really, when they have a 4 mana draw 4 and they get it all at once, and you have Maze Mind Tome, which is like 10 mana draw 4. You really need to play the long game because you can keep up with them, but you just need the time.
So let me ask you this. I know that there's been a number of versions of rogues floating around. So let's ask A of all, is the list converging on like a consensus best version yet? And or do you think that there is a best version to win the Yorion matchup?
I think the answer on the convergence is still no, because what's out of the question now is like the 20-some creature curved out rogue deck. The Thieves Guild Enforcer, Soaring Thought Thief, Nighthawk Scavenger, Rankle,
like,
Zareth.
No one's playing Zareth San in the winners metagame.
No, they are.
Okay.
But not in like the curve out aggro list.
Got it.
So Stanislav Sivka posted, I think, the best record out of the rival lists. And I believe he yeah, I think he went 9-3 with his build.
You are right that he, along with 2 other players, so he's basically like tied for the top 3 players who all got there with Dimir Rogues.
9-3. All of these are 9-3.
Yeah, so I actually don't know if their lists are the same or not, but let's just...
They're not. They're not the same. It's interesting.
Yeah, let's... this might be fun, actually. Let's take a look at Stan's list here, so why don't you take us through it?
So Stanislav Sivka's deck does not play Lurrus as companion, which is something that several players tried, including Gabrielle Nasif in this event.
Okay.
And this Sivka's list, though, goes deeper. So usually the 4 Soaring Thought Thief, 4 Thieves Guild Enforcer, and then 4 Drown in the Loch and Into the Story are givens. This list has Shark Typhoon. It also has 2 copies of Gadwick the Wizened, 2 copies of Brazen Borrower, and 2 copies of Zareth San the Trickster.
This is
in the deck.
Kind of spicy, man. I gotta say, this is a bit of a departure from a normal rogues list here.
We also see 2 copies of Essence Scatter and 2 copies of Didn't Say Please, and an absolute smoking gun to nonsense, 3 copies of Into the Story instead of 4.
I was just gonna ask. I was like, what kind of mad lad cuts the 4th Into the Story? I guess Stanislav Sivka.
Gadwick is interesting because you've got to think at least that kind of fills in a little of that Into the Story card draw, but it's still really surprising, I think.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious if that's somewhat of a concession to some of these aggro lists, because if you can stick a Gadwick with all of your like flash rogues and counter spells and interaction and stuff, you can actually do a fairly good job of locking your opponent's board down. Do you think that has something to do with it?
I think that has something to do with it, but yeah, Scorching Dragonfire kind of came out as a really good removal spell in this split, and it wasn't absolutely taken over the format yet, so there was reason to believe Gadwick might live. Nowadays, I think it would get Dragonfired quickly. Here's my theory. Because I played a good amount of rogues versus rogues, and one of the big things is that if one of the rogues players can initiate a counter fight, sometimes all the mana gets tapped, all the counters get played, and the rogue player resolves like the Agadeem's Awakening, creates a board state, says go. The other rogue player can't really do anything to punish it because all their cards are flash and not high impact. And a rogue deck that has Gadwick the Wizened and Shark Typhoon, if they initiate that counter fight, win it or lose it, if their opponent is tapped out, they can untap and severely punish the opponent by resolving a Shark Typhoon, which we talked about before, or resolving Gadwick and completely refilling the hand.
And I'll tell you what, if y'all haven't seen this interaction, it's a sweet one. If you get Shark Typhoon down and then you resolve an Into the Story, whether or not you pay 7 mana for it, you do get a 7/7 Shark. So that's nothing to scoff at.
Nice.
So on the other side, your Cling to Dust always come out as 1/1, so that's a little annoying. But
it is.
You take the good with the bad, I guess. Mystical Dispute, though, comes out as a 3/3, so that's a pretty sweet interaction. Cool. So let's compare this then. I would be curious to see this as opposed to, like, let's take a look at LSV's list here. Wow, he's also not playing Lurrus. Am I right on that?
That is correct.
Okay, but he is running 4 Shark Typhoons, a very lean suite of rogues. He's only got 4 Soaring Thought Thieves and 4 Thieves Guild Enforcers. And then if we look down the list, he's running a good amount of counter magic. He's got the 4 full Into the Stories. So I guess that's it. I guess this is like a pretty control slanted version of the list. 4 Typhoons, 4 Into the Stories, only 8 rogues. We're not seeing any crabs in the main. Looks like he doesn't have any crabs in the list at all.
Neither did Sivka.
Yeah, interesting. So maybe people are just moving away from this for the most part. So yeah, this is just like straight up control rogues to me. Anything else stand out to you about this?
I would say that people aren't necessarily moving away from the crabs, just these 2 particular players have different builds with no crabs, but there are still a lot of crab versions out there. And you're going to continue to have to be prepared for it and how things play out differently. This deck from LSV, and a similar version, is played by Gabrielle Nasif in the MPL, who I believe had 8 wins there. Could be wrong, but I believe that's correct. This version is like tap out never. 100% draw go control, except it has removal spells that can also turn into very aggressive threats in Soaring Thought Thief and Thieves Guild Enforcer. They do function much like removal spells when you flash them in and ambush block things. And of course, Shark Typhoon doing its thing. The Shark Typhoons also, I think that one of the highlights of them is the hard cast against Rakdos, which is supposed to be a tough matchup, and the hard cast against the fellow rogue decks, like we talked about.
And I just like to note as well, LSV's only running one Agadeem's Awakening, which I think is a smart call, whereas Stan's Lift runs two, which is also a smart call because he's got like literally twice the number of creatures he's running. So it's those little subtleties end up mattering a lot, I think, in how well these decks perform.
I want to call out two things. The first is that Gabrielle Nasif ran almost the same list with an exception. There was a Luris in the sideboard. So that the Shark Typhoons could be subbed out in bad matchups, and Luris could be moved as a companion.
Okay, so in the board, but not started as a companion.
Yep, I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
The other card I absolutely love in this version of Rogues, and that I've been trying on ladder, is Selendi Vision. There are 2 copies in this list. I've been up to 4 copies. The card is 3 mana to look at your top 6, pick an instant or sorcery, and put it into your hand, or you can play it as a tapped blue source. I find in Rogues, and in this particular never tap out version of Rogues, that's always a Drown in the Lock or Into the Story, which are your broken cards.
That's what I was thinking. It's just
oh my gosh.
It's just 2 more copies of your best cards.
Yeah. Really, I think something that not enough people are trying in Rogues and probably should be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it. I think this is a really key example of where the card is best. Like when you have, especially Into the Story, when you have a heavy hitter in your deck that Selendi can hit that's just like so much better than anything else. Like I would also consider running it if I was leaning on something like a Sublime Epiphany, right? It's another example of just like a completely game opening, game wrecking spell that you can fetch up with that. So yeah, I think that's really cool. Let's take a look finally at Bernardo Santos's list. He's our 3rd Rivals player who went 9-3.
I bet this has 16 creatures. Yes, it is. It is another different version.
So this is a list. I'm trying to think. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this might be the list they call Turbo Crab. Is that right?
I don't know what they call Turbo Crab anymore, but this is the list with the most in common with what Seth Manfield played in the Omnath meta at the Grand Finals.
So this is running Loris's Companion. It's got 4 Ruin Crabs in the main. It's got 4 Merfolk Windrobber, 4 Soaring Thought Thief, 4 Thieves Guild Enforcer. Also running 3 copies of Agadeem's Awakening. So this is a deck that's like always going to get my crabs back. The only thing you can do about it is exile them. Otherwise, I'm just going to have at least 1 crab the whole game, basically. It even runs a Call the Death Dweller.
There's not a lot of downside to a Call the Death Dweller when you have Luris like in your deck, and you just always want to be able to get your second Luris when you draw it late. And what Seth Manfield kind of showed everybody, he wasn't running Ruin Crab, he wasn't running Windrobber, but he showed the power of Luris in this archetype. And I think that time hasn't been kind to Vantress Gargoyle, but the Ruin Crab, Windrobber, Luris setups with Agadeem's Awakening and Call the Death Dweller to get them back, this deck just seems to never stop attacking either the life total or the deck or both simultaneously. And it's so tilting to play against this deck. This is almost exactly, by the way, what Preddy ran against me. When there's a crab on the field, you just feel things slipping away. It turns on their best cards. When you're being attacked by Thieves Guild Enforcers and Thought Thieves, and they have like 4 power, your life totals, like you're always looking at your deck in your life and like, I don't even know how to defend myself right now because whatever I kill comes back. It's such a tilting deck to play against. I can't tell you how many comments I get on YouTube every day of how much people hate Rogues. They hate this deck, just like gnaws at their psyche, I think.
As far as the ladder is concerned, it has definitely supplanted Mono Red as the eye roll deck. When your opponent goes turn 1 Blue Source, Merfolk Windrobber, or Ruin Crab, you're just like, here we go again. I wonder what they're going to do on turn 2.
It's going to be a nice time with my opponent today.
Yeah, exactly. Look, at least it's not a cleave deck, right? We take what we can get.
I will say that rogues, to pilot it really well, like there are the one-sided, lopsided, like I play Thieves Guild Enforcer, I play Thought Thief, I play my Drown in the Lock, I play another Drown in the Lock. Like those games seem pretty brainless, but I mean, a lot of games with rogues are very hard. Incredibly hard from both sides. Like you got to big brain it. You really have to bring it.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. To be honest, I think it's the most skill testing deck in the format right now. And I actually think there's something beautiful to that, right? It's beautiful how you can have a deck that's like the most popular on the ladder, but which is also one of the decks that rewards you the most for top level play. That's a really cool deck, in my opinion. So I'm really glad that it's here, and I'm really glad it's just such an interesting foil in the meta game. And I do think it's quite well balanced as well. You know, like, I don't know, like anyone calling to ban Into the Story or whatever, like I just don't see that happening anytime soon. So
it's really hard to take that seriously.
Yeah, exactly.
From where we've been, and the fact that escape cards are so potent, you know, of a problem for the deck. And to top it off, blue-black decks have been terrible for a long time.
Yeah.
You have to go back to Scarab God Torrential Gearhulk to find good blue-black decks.
Exactly.
It's been many years, and it's really funny to me that they print a few really good blue-black cards. The package comes together, it starts to perform well, and now everybody's like, ugh, it's so lame, man. Mill is stupid, ban Ruin Crap. Counters are stupid, ban Drown in the Lock.
It was the same thing with Simic. You know, it's like, when was the last time Simic was good? Until suddenly, here we are.
Well, you know? I mean, Simic had a few other things going on. Oko is not the same as Thieves Guild Enforcer.
Indeed. So, you know, I just wanted to take a moment to appreciate the design, because I just think this is good magic. Dimir Rogues is good magic, and it should be applauded whenever that is a viable thing to do.
Very tiny claps
polite luncheon claps for Wizards of the Coast. Indeed. Over here. I really want to talk about the deck which slaughtered you and also happened to slaughter the MPL last weekend, Gruel Adventures. I mean, Rei Sato just utterly smashed the tournament with an 11-1 record. That's just so much more dominant than anyone. The next best MPL member was world champion Paulo Vitor Dama de Rosa. I also want to talk about his spicy deck because we were very interested in it last week. But I mean, 11-1 in like one of the most stacked fields of Magic players you'll ever see. So I really want to talk about Gruel Adventure.
Can I give you an anecdote about this deck really quickly?
Yeah, lay it on us.
Brad Nelson forgot to, he had a lot going on with the MPL weekend. He forgot to register his deck for the LFM Streamer Showdown, where he would eventually beat me. So he net decked Rei Sato's exact list and registered it without a second thought. So I got net decked by the MPL. I just thought that I thought that was some kind of some people will find that to be sweet justice for a content creator like myself who provides net decks to the masses.
Hey, you know, it happens to all of us. Even people at the top of the chain they know when to do a good net decking.
Oh yeah, minus $500. Boom. Easy net deck.
Hey, my friend, that is hardly the most costly net deck in the history of Magic, so consider yourself fortunate.
Okay, I will.
I'm going to give a quick rundown of this deck, all right? So we've got 25 creatures, definitely a creature deck. 4 Bone Crushers, 4 Brushfire Elementals, 4 Edgewall Innkeepers, 4 Kazandu Mammoths, 4 Lovestruck Beasts, 2 Questing Beasts. So the Fallen Prince returns to a green deck. And 3 Scavenging Ooze. And then we've got 2 Primal Mites and 4 Shatterskull Smashings in the sorcery slot. We've got a couple of Scorching Dragonfires. And this is one of the things I'm most interested to talk with you about. A 3-2 split here. 3 Embercleaves and 2 The Great Henges. So, okay, first of all, I think that we're all pretty familiar with the game plan of this deck. It's something along the lines of play aggressive creatures, Embercleave them up, try to get a little value out of your Edgewall Innkeeper, and then if the game goes long, try to get an incredible amount of value out of the Great Henge. So Talk to me about this, CGB. I think a lot of people in the past would have looked at an Embercleave Great Henge split and been like, you got to lean in, man. You know, like you got to pick one side of the divide. Do you want to be a Cleave deck or do you want to be a Henge deck? This deck is just like, both, please. So why are we seeing this now? I don't remember in the history of Magic seeing another competitive deck that ran both of these cards. Like, what's going on there?
Well, I think that a general way to look at it is if you play either of these on turn 4, you will probably win the game. The question is, if you could play one or the other, is one better in a situation than the other? It's almost always yes. I mean, it comes down to the opponent's board and your board, of course. Is Embercleave better here or is Henge better? If you're on the defensive, obviously Henge is very much better than Embercleave, like significantly, and it favors you in a long game. If you're on the offensive, Embercleave will end the game right now, but Henge will probably still end the game eventually, barring some really terrible top decks. And when you have the option of both, because you're a red-green deck that needs double green and wants double red anyway for Shatter Skull Smashing, Questing Beast, then you may as well hedge your bets. Because it's a lot better to have one of each than two of one.
I mean, that's true. The second copy of your legendary artifact does very little unless your opponents remove the first one. So that was one of the things that stood out to me most about this deck and seemed like it could lead to some very awkward draws. You know, like imagine a game in which you start with an Embercleave and a Great Henge in your opening hand and then you draw another copy of either of those. I don't know. But maybe you just got so much value out of, you know, the first two that you're just kind of happy with it.
I'm also going to tell you about the squeeze. And this is where it's important to remember that this is an open deck list event. Everybody sees the deck list. Your opponent plays a turn 3 Kazandu Mammoth. You have a Drown in the Lock in your hand, and there are enough cards in the opponent's graveyard that you could kill this Kazandu Mammoth. When do you do it? If they are an Embercleave deck, you want to do it in combat and blow out their Embercleave play, or right before combat. Because if they get to attack, say they have 2 creatures, they can always Embercleave the other one. And they have a lot of haste creatures too, so they could Embercleave a hasted creature. So you want to wait till combat. You want to see the equip. All right? But they're a Henge deck. So if you let them untap and play a land and grow the Mammoth, they could slam the Great Henge. And if they don't have 9 cards in their deck for you to counter it with Drown in the Lock, it's going to stick. And it's probably going to beat you. So it forces these decks that want to play instant speed game plans into committing. And sometimes they're going to get burned for it.
Kazandu Mammoth, quietly one of the best cards in the format. Let's take a moment to appreciate how much that card's been performing. Just does everything this deck wants to do, right?
Yep, took $500 from me. No biggie. I'm cool. I'm not bitter.
The elephant in the valley, shall we say.
Why didn't it just stay extinct? Okay, so I do want to say something about this deck, because I think it's misleading that people think that they know Gruel. And I think the reason that this is a top-tier deck right now is because it is not a typical Gruel deck at all. I think that this is the best Golgari deck in the format. And by that I mean, like, slug it out mid-range. Because when you grab this sideboard, man, when you grab this sideboard, 3 Ox of Aganis, and trust me, they do come in against rogues, but they don't only come in against rogues. 2 Klothys, God of Destiny. Rogues hates that card. They can't do anything about that card. And it just picks either graveyard to pieces, and it makes you so hard to kill. And 2 Garrix, 2 Vivian Monsters Advocate, so 4 Planeswalkers. Embrace Shieldbreaker, which is a 2-for-1, and triggers your Edgewall Innkeeper, blows up those glass caskets, which are a serious liability. 2 more Scorching Dragonfires, and 2 a Crowan War. Steal your thing? Steal your big old critter? It's very good in the mirror. Like, this sideboard lets the deck transform into the best mid-range deck in the format, in my opinion. Like, you can... Kroxa is not going to grind you out. It really won't. In fact, you're going to steal it, probably, with a Crowan War. And you have ways to exile it with Scorching Dragonfire. This deck is like Gruel is now the good Golgari mid-range deck.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. And if you just look at if you just go down the list, it really is a collection of some of the more powerful cards in the format. Like, for example, Embercleave is like the best damage engine in the format right now. The Great Henge is definitely one of the best card advantage engines in the format. You get to run Bone Crusher Giant, just one of the best all-around creatures in the format. You get to run Edgewall Innkeeper, which is like a 1-mana card drawing engine, which basically no one else really has anything like that. And then you just get stuff like Scavenging Ooze. And like you said, you get this really cool access to this really cool sideboard here. So I totally agree. It just contains some of the most powerful cards in the format in one very, very nice package. So I just love how this can be a kill you on turn 4 deck, this can be a grind into the late game deck, and most things in between. So really, really good stuff, I think. Let's just touch briefly before we go here on Paulo's list again, because he had a 9-3 record with this deck. So Paulo clearly figured out something that was going to work well in the meta game. So we talked in more length last episode about this. So if you want to kind of get the big rundown, then let's go for it. And unfortunately, I did not get to see Paulo play this deck. But, I just wanted to call out that he made some really good calls, and clearly this deck could brawl.
Clearly. With Yorion thinking that it had an easy matchup with Rakdos, it spent all its time focusing on other Yorion decks and fearing rogues. And the Rakdos matchup with rogues was naturally pretty decent because they're milling Kroxa and the fuel for it. And this deck just lined up and shot down the Yorion decks that it played against, and turned out it actually had a very good matchup, and everybody had written it off, and they were punished for it. Yeah,
I love it. And I mean, there's just little things I'm sure that come up with this list, like, for example, Robber of the Rich can block a Merfolk Wind Robber, right? I don't know. I mean, in general, this list actually looks pretty good against rogues. Having a good game against one of the arguably best decks in the format, and then having a solid plan against one of the other decks that you expect to be good in the format. I don't know. I think it's really cool. I think if you want to have a start playing competitively on the ladder, I would probably look at one of these 3 decks. Yorion decks, Rogue decks, and I guess 4, right? Yorion,
4,
Rogues, Gruel, and Rakdos. Those seem to be the really performing archetypes at the moment.
Yep, and I think that those 4 make up like the A and B tiers, and I don't know. There will probably be something else that can certainly climb those ranks, but those are the decks that I think have the most play and ability to adapt to each other, and will probably remain a part of the meta for a while.
So one wonderful thing absent from CGB's evaluation there was that we currently have no S-tier decks in the format, which to me just means a healthy format, right?
So Omnath?
Omnath.
Good riddance. I love this format. It's the main reason I was pretty happy to dive back into some competitive play. I was actually enjoying playing Magic, and as frustrating as grinding out endless matches with rogues can be, it is very rewarding when you win, as opposed to the absolute just kind of yawn and relief that came from Omnath mirrors.
Yeah, when you beat an Omnath deck, you didn't feel like you won, you just felt like they lost.
Yeah, and it never lasted long, because the very next match you're on the draw, and on turn 3 they have a Genesis ultimatum, and it's back to, I guess, nothing matters. But here it's like these games were amazing, and I encourage anybody to watch the MPL videos, watch my VODs of the tournaments I played in, and I don't know anybody who's watched them and says that this isn't exciting and compelling Magic. If you don't like this Magic, I don't know what to tell you. It's great for me. It's better than it's been in a year.
If you don't like this Magic, play some Zendikar Rising Limited, because that's been buttering my toast, and it is still a fun format. So yeah, between that, between this being a good limited format, now it's a good standard format, I feel like Arena is in a better place than it's been in a really long time.
If we could just have it on mobile, man.
Oh, baby.
They delayed it. Did you see?
I didn't. Was there some news around that?
Oh, yes, there was. Very quietly stated on the Hasbro earnings call, not in an official release or anything, that MTG Arena on mobile has been delayed.
Oh, okay.
Early 2021.
Yeah, okay.
To the surprise of, I don't think many.
Nobody. to the surprise of Hasbro's CEO and nobody else, perhaps.
Probably.
I was never placing any kind of hopes or stakes on MTG Arena Mobile, so, I mean, if they release anything whatsoever, it's going to be a win, in my opinion, and probably a lull, so...
My content career aches for this because I've still got my old phone right here, and I've got my camera on my desk, and we're going to hook that sucker up. We're going to turn on the camera. We're going to see how long it takes us to melt the phone and get it to burst into flames.
I'll bet that when you install MTG Arena, you have to actually buy a magnifying glass and a stylus that they ship to you just so that you can play it on your phone.
I'm just picturing me getting out the monocle.
I don't know. I mean, it's going to take something. It's going to take a monocle or a miracle, I think, to get it running on mobile. So let's see which it is. And with that, we bid you adieu. Thank you for listening to another fine week of the ArenaCraft podcast. You guys are just the best. Shout out to all of our listeners on YouTube. Y'all are actually the best. And if you don't listen on YouTube, go leave a comment in the comments section telling all these YouTubers why the podcast subscribers are actually the best, all right? Get a little artificial competition going here. So speaking of which, you can find us on pretty much all the podcast platforms. You can find us on Spotify, we're on Stitcher, we're on iTunes. We are on YouTube, expanding every day. You can find Covertgoblue at his YouTube. Go look him up. Always a banging production over there. And he also streams Monday through Thursday, 4 p.m. Eastern. CGB, I will catch you next week.
Later.